Today we're going to talk about the transnational distribution of labor and consumption, because this is actually the point I was trying to make, I've been trying to make during these talks. The deep connection that we cannot lose track of between transnational migrancy and the administration of labor globally. Migrants, and of course there are many different kinds of migrants. There are students, for instance, people who go abroad just to study. It's people like me. I mean, people, academics, intellectuals, professionals, who move for many different personal reasons and social reasons, political reasons. But the underlying issue is always that for the majority of migrants, there is an economic reason. And the economic reason, of course, means that people want to have a better life. Oh, that's simple to understand. But it's too simple or too simplistic just to say that. The fact is that most of the people don't want to move. I mean, if you ask migrants what they would have done if they had a choice, they will say, most of the people, not everybody, but most of the people will say, oh, I just will have a stay. I mean, if I had a nice job, I had certain opportunities, I can raise my family, I can have a life. So there is this inequality between different countries, different regions, different places, between the city and the country. That is what is actually moving people and taking people and pushing people to take risks, many times very, very heavy risks, and many times putting their life at risk, and their families' lives at risk, just to have this opportunity for a better life. So it is a very costly endeavor. Migration is a very costly endeavor, personally and socially, because for the individual is always a very difficult, in most cases. I'm not putting myself into that situation, although I'm a migrant myself, but for most of the people is a very difficult decision. It's a once in a lifetime decision that is, once it's done, you embark in a whole process, a new life, and it's a very dangerous, many times, dangerous adventure. So for people to do that, there must be a strong underlying reasons. Of course, there is this desire to participate, be part of the benefits of globalization. Everything that, TV is offering us. Cable TV is offering everybody in Latin America. It's offering in Latin America the same stuff, the same things, the same kind of life, material and symbolic goods that, any individual in the world is supposed to be able to enjoy. But at the same time, there are constraints, there are limitations. I mean, you don't have access to that. So how can I have access to that? That's the question. Well, if I can't get it here, let's try to migrate. Let's go there. But in this process, I mean, there is an underlying force, and this underlying force is, the fact that these migrants, the labor that these migrants are providing is what is needed. So, transnational migrancy is intricately connected to this global regime of accumulation. The vast majority of migrants, no matter the distance traveled or the borders crossed, their legal status or the citizenship are part of a broader phenomenon of global scope, transnational migrancy. So, there is a process of inclusion and exclusion, different processes of inclusion and exclusion, segmentation and integration that are going on. And this has to do what Manuel Castells calls the variable geometry of globalization. What really counts is that there is a new organization of labor that is done globally. And according to Castells, he divides this in 4 groups, and he says that they are the producers of high value, which is based on informational labor, and the producers of high value, of course, and the informational labor is maintained in the core economies, in the central economies. The producers of high volume, which is, the kind of labor that is based on lower cost labor, very cheap labor. So that can be sent, to China, can be sent to the maquilas in Mexico, can be sent to the Philippines, the actual Nike can be done anywhere. What is important to hold is the brand and the know-how of that Nike. And then the producers of raw materials based on natural endowments, and there we have some countries like, you see that in Latin America nowadays, one of the main problems is the return of extractive economies. Open mining, the production of oil, and so on and so forth. And then finally, the redundant producers reduced to devalued labor. And he says they are all organized in networks and flows using the technological infrastructure of the information economy. What is important is, the division is just is a good illustration, I think, a good illustration of the segmentation of labor that is produced, is maintained globally, not only between countries, but inside the countries, and is regional, cuts across different ways. We can find this inside the U.S., the same kind of the 4 levels of these 4 levels of producers of different labors, different kind of labor can be found also in the U.S. But it's important to keep in mind that all these different forms of production are kept together and organized together in a single global distribution of labor. According to Michel Chossudovsky, then, and this is related to what I said before, globalization involves a new international and transnational division of labor and consumption, but that implies necessarily and structurally the global reproduction of poverty. And this is a crucial and important issue, many times difficult to understand, because all the publicity and all the discourses go exactly in the opposite. Actually, globalization is actually enriching everybody, which is not true. Actually, poverty has to be maintained, and in order to of course, this is the richest economy in humankind. This is we are living in a system that produces as much as any previous system, economic system or social system produced before. Anyway, and the accumulation of riches are absolutely incredible. But at the same time, we have this accumulation, this constant reproduction of poverty, because poverty is a structural element. I mean, capital needs to have these peoples who are kept without jobs, who are kept without the possibility of finding a job in order to maintain salaries down, and in order to maintain, therefore, the rates of profits high. I mean, this is one of the principles of economic capital economics, to maintain an army of reserve of labor that will be will always offer, new cheap hands. This is happening globally, and this is happening internally. We can see this in the U.S. as we can see that everywhere. So, transnational migrancy is actually the weakest link in this global chain of labor. Transnational migrancy complements perversely, in a perverse way, the maquila system and the informal economies that exist in Latin America. People migrate, when migrants come to the U.S. from Latin America, they usually have been before working in the maquila system, or have been living and working in the informal economy, and they have probably been internal migrants before coming to the U.S. And this happens, not only with the Mexicans coming from Mexico, but they are also from, the Central Americans, and even, people who come from other continents, like Chinese, coming through Central America and then going up through Mexico to cross the border and coming to the U.S. Transnational migrancy, maquilas, sweatshops in the U.S. as anywhere, informal economies and human trafficking are all interlinked in the international and transnational distribution of labor. There is a whole system that maintains, the constant offer of cheap labor to do everything that is needed in different places, and in a fluid way. In this regard, human trafficking, which is an issue in itself, and it is part of this, and there are increasing numbers, the numbers of people who are trafficked, not only for prostitution, but also for many other kinds of services, to work in sweatshops, to work in the fields. People is trafficked and maintained in forms of self-servitude, sometimes for years, in higher and higher numbers in the U.S. as well as anywhere. And this, of course, includes primarily high numbers of women and children.